picture a desert landscape, right? Late 19th century, it is perfectly still.
Oh, just that kind of quiet that feels almost heavy.
Exactly. There's no wind, absolutely no movement. Just that intense, shimmering heat distorting the horizon right above the sand. And standing in that heat is a group of soldiers. They're heavily armed, sweating in these thick wool uniforms.
And in that exact moment, those soldiers believe with absolute certainty that they're completely alone. I mean,
Hmm.
they've checked their topographical maps, they've scouted the perimeter with field glasses. According to, well, every metric they trust, the area is totally clear.
But the woman in that desert, standing miles away, like entirely out of their line of sight, she knows otherwise.
She definitely does.
She isn't looking at a map. She isn't looking through a spyglass. She's just standing perfectly still with her hands raised to the sky. Her eyes are closed. And she's listening to something, like a whisper maybe, or a shift in the atmosphere, that those soldiers cannot hear.
It's chilling, honestly.
It really is. She turns her head slowly, almost as if she's catching a sound carried across miles of empty air. And the moment she stops turning, she knows exactly where they are.
Wow.
Welcome to the deep dive. The woman in that desert was Lozen, a legendary warrior of the Apache, and the unseen connection she was, listening to allowed her people to survive a military machine that outgunned them 100 to 1.
Yeah, we're pulling from the historical excerpts of the site of Lozen, warrior of the Apache Desert today. And I gotta say, this material forces you to look at a period of history through a lens that completely defies conventional Western logic.
Oh, for sure.
We're looking at the late 19th century. This is a period where the United States cavalry and Mexican forces were aggressively pushing into Apache. They were utilizing telegraphs, railroads, and just overwhelming numbers to force the Apache onto reservations.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the contrast here is just staggering. To truly grasp what Lozen was doing, we had to look at the sheer logistical nightmare her people were up against.
It was massive.
Right. On one side, you have these encroaching military forces, and they represent this rigid, mechanical, industrial way of moving through the world. They rely on supply lines, they rely on printed maps, and they have this arrogant belief that they can just draw a line on a piece of paper and change the reality of the land.
Right. They thought they could just legislate the terrain.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have Lozen relying on an invisible connection to the earth to keep her people alive.
The text actually uses a deeply evocative phrase to describe the era she grew up in. It says she was born into a world already on fire.
That's intense.
It really paints a picture. By the 1870s and 1880s, the Apache were not just fighting a war of territory. They were fighting a desperate war of existential survival. I mean, they were being relentlessly hunted from the north by American troops and from the south by Mexican armies.
And right in the middle of this massive, systematic squeeze is Lozen, and she's riding alongside her brother, Victorio.
Yeah, Victorio.
And he is not just anyone. The source notes, he was one of the absolute fiercest, most brilliant Apache tactical leaders of the entire era.
He really was a towering figure of resistance. But what is remarkable is how Victorio himself viewed her.
Right.
In an era and a culture with pretty strictly defined roles, he left no ambiguity about his sister's importance. The text includes a direct quote from him where he calls Lozen his right hand. He states plainly that she is strong as a man, braver than most, and cunning in strategy.
Just think about the weight of that endorsement for a second.
Yeah.
Coming from a frontline commander who is actively evading thousands of federal troops, it tells you everything about the sheer presence she commanded.
Absolutely.
When I look at the dynamic between the two of them, I sort of think about it this way. Victorio was the loud, destructive thunder of the Apache resistance.
Right.
He was the vanguard, drawing all the army's attention and gunfire. The soldiers were always bracing for him.
That's a great way to put it.
But Lozen, she was the quiet, sharp lightning, striking exactly where needed before anyone even knew a storm was coming. She acted like an incredibly advanced human radar system, allowing that infantry and all the non-combatants to navigate entirely in the Army's blind spots.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that radar analogy explains exactly how a band of just a few hundred Apache could tie up thousands of heavily armed cavalry troops for years.
It's wild to think about.
She was forged in a mobile crucible. I mean, the Apache weren't defending stone fortresses. They were constantly on the move through some of the most unforgiving, arid terrain in North America.
Oh, the desert out there is brutal.
Yeah. Her physical training, her horsemanship, and her rifle skills were exceptional. But her true legendary status within the tribe didn't come from her physical strength. It came from her ability to neutralize the military's only real advantage, which was their strategic planning.
Which brings us to the core of her legend, the thing that officers wrote about in their journals with complete bafflement, the ritual of the sight. Because, if you are a mobile band of families being hunted by a synchronized binational military machine, your ultimate strategic advantage isn't a better rifle.
No, not at all.
It's knowing exactly when the trap is closing before it actually snaps shut.
The source material walks us through the specific mechanics of this pre-battle ritual. Before breaking camp, or when they suspected they were being tracked, Lozen would step away from the group.
Just completely alone.
Right. She would stand facing the open, empty expanse of the desert. She would stretch her arms out, keeping her palms completely open and facing the sky, and she would begin to turn very slowly in a full circle.
And the accounts say her hands would actually tingle or change color as she turned.
Yeah, that physical reaction is so fascinating.
She would follow the horizon, and at a certain point, the sensation would peak. She would stop turning, stand perfectly still, and point her hands in a specific direction. And then she would declare the exact distance and numbers of the enemy approaching from that bearing.
And the text explicitly notes that she didn't look for footprints, she didn't read tracks in the traditional sense, and she didn't guess.
Right.
The Apache believed she was calling on a higher power to reveal the unseen, like she was receiving a direct spiritual transmission from the land itself. And the crucial assertion in the text is this: more often than not, her readings were flawlessly accurate.
Now, I have to jump in here with some pushback, because whenever I read accounts of historical mysticism, my modern brain immediately tries to rationalize it.
Oh, of course. We all do that.
Right. And for you, the listener, you might be doing the exact same thing right now. Is it possible that what we are calling the sight was actually just an incredibly extreme, almost subconscious form of hyper-observant tactical genius?
Like a Sherlock Holmes kind of deduction?
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe she was unconsciously processing micro shifts in the barometric pressure. Or, noticing the flight patterns of birds miles away. Or maybe she possessed such a flawless photographic memory of the Chihuahuan desert topography that she could just mathematically deduce exactly where a heavy cavalry column would be forced to bottleneck.
So you're asking if this could just be tactical genius masked by the language of mysticism.
Yeah. Regardless of where it came from, the psychological effect on our enemies would have been devastating, right? But what do you think?
Oh, what's fascinating here is that you're trying to put a modern Western tactical lens on a deeply spiritual Apache practice. And that's a trap historians fall into all the time.
Fair point.
To the Apache, the explanation was simple. She was guided, gifted, and chosen. If she was just observing the flight path of crows or calculating topographical bottlenecks, why the physical ritual? Why turning in a circle with her palms open until they physically tingled?
That is a very good question.
You have to remember, the United States Cavalry employed the best native scouts in the world, including other Apache who knew the exact same topography and bird patterns, and those scouts still couldn't corner Lozen and Victorio.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the scouts.
Yeah. We have to accept that to her people and to the reality she operated in, this wasn't rapid math, it was a literal spiritual gift. And to the encroaching soldiers, it represented this unsettling reality. A stark reminder that not everything in the world can be mapped, controlled, or defeated with sheer force.
And the tactical reality proves how deeply her people trusted that gift.
Yeah.
Because she could reliably pinpoint these converging patrols, the Apache couldn't just use her as a scout. They had to build their entire evasion strategy around her.
Absolutely.
I mean, just imagine the logistical nightmare of moving hundreds of people, including elders and infants, through the desert without making a sound.
Exactly. When Lozen pointed and said the cavalry was 10 miles east, the tribe didn't form a committee to discuss it.
Right, there's no debate.
They immediately altered their routes. They would break camp in silence, scatter into pre-planned evasion paths, and just thread the needle right through the gaps in the military's net.
That level of trust seamlessly transitions us into how this power manifested on the ground. She wasn't just a mystic sitting in a tent. She was actively managing the survival of her community in real time.
Yeah, she was incredibly hands-on.
The text frames her through this incredible dual role. She was both a protector and a warrior, the shield and the blade.
Let's look at the shield aspect first. The source material describes these oral histories as being half memory, half myth. She was repeatedly tasked with guiding the most vulnerable groups, the women, the children, the wounded, safely through territories swarming with enemy troops.
There is one specific, harrowing anecdote in the excerpts that completely anchors this. It's the story of Lozen single-handedly escorting a woman and a newborn child across a raging river.
That story is just unbelievable.
The context here is brutal. They're actively fleeing an ambush. Cavalry patrols are sweeping the banks, looking for stragglers. The water is freezing, moving fast, and the physical danger of drowning is compounded by the lethal threat of an army patrol spotting them at any second.
And in that moment, she isn't acting as a combatant. She is acting as a lifeline. She has to project absolute calm. She uses her intuition to map the blind spots of the soldiers on the banks, navigating the mother and child through the freezing water entirely undetected.
Incredible.
The text uses a stunning phrase to describe her in this moment. It says she crossed the river, carrying life through death's shadow.
Carrying life through death's shadow. It's an incredibly poetic way to describe what is essentially a high-stakes special operations extraction.
It really is.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. You have that profound, life-preserving compassion. But the moment the non-combatants were safe, she flipped a switch. She wasn't just a shield. She was, as the text emphasizes, a highly lethal blade.
The duality is striking. Because military structures usually separate non-combatant evacuation from frontline assault. But Lozen executed both simultaneously.
She just did it all.
When it was time to fight, she didn't hang back. She rode directly into the crossfire beside the men. She was known for stealing horses from under the noses of the cavalry, directly depriving the enemy of their mobility while replenishing her own tribe's resources.
And she struck with terrifying precision. Because of her sight, she knew exactly when to break contact and disappear into the landscape before the army could even mount a counterattack.
It's unparalleled tactical awareness.
It is exceedingly rare in history to find a figure equally renowned for the lethal precision of a blade and the fierce, selfless compassion of a shield.
I think why soldiers feared her so deeply wasn't just her martial skill with the Springfield rifle. I mean, there were plenty of skilled Apache marksmen out there.
Right.
What broke their morale was the realization that she always seemed one step ahead, knowing exactly where to strike without any logical explanation.
They were basically fighting an enemy who could see them in the dark.
Precisely. To a military institution that relies entirely on predictability, logistics, and tangible reality, she was a terrifying anomaly. She proved that their maps were useless.
Yeah?
She proved that their overwhelming numbers could be outmaneuvered by intuition.
But history, especially the history of the American West, rarely rewards anomalies with happy endings. And anyone listening to this naturally wants to know how a story about someone with such profound, almost mythic power concludes. Does she win the war?
It's a tough reality to face.
The transition from her peak legendary status to the tragic historical reality of her final days is incredibly sobering.
The text remains completely impartial about the brutal reality of her end. There was no grand cinematic victory. There was no final battle where she drove the soldiers away and saved the Apache lands forever.
It doesn't work like the movies.
No, it doesn't. The sheer grinding weight of the industrial military complex simply outlasted them.
Victorio, her brother, was eventually killed at the Battle of Tres Castillos in Mexico. And it is a haunting historical footnote that Lozen was not with him during that battle.
Right.
She had been escorting a pregnant woman to safety. The one time she wasn't there to act as his radar, the trap finally snapped shut.
It's heartbreaking. After Victorio's death, she continued to fight alongside other leaders, including Geronimo. She was conducting a grueling, years-long guerrilla campaign.
It's nonstop.
But eventually the Apache were worn down to nothing. Exhausted by endless pursuit, decimated by constant running, and facing the total erasure of their way of life, the remaining bands surrendered.
And the military didn't let them return to their ancestral lands. They loaded them onto prisoner of war trains and shipped them across the country to Florida and later to the Mount Vernon barracks in Alabama.
Such a stark contrast to the open desert.
The text notes that Lozen, the woman who could feel the exact pulse of the Chihuahuan Desert, was imprisoned in the damp, unfamiliar environment of the American South. She died there, likely of tuberculosis, far from the land she had fought so fiercely to protect.
It is a quiet, institutionalized death for a warrior defined by extraordinary, untamed action. But the source material makes a vital pivot here.
Yeah, the story doesn't really end there, does it?
No, it doesn't. It emphasizes that while her physical life ended in a military prison, her story broke free. The military system tried to erase her entirely, yet her name and her abilities were carried forward in oral histories, in memories.
And even in those uneasy journal entries of the soldiers who could never quite figure out how she beat them.
Exactly. The feeling that someone can still see what others cannot, it lingered.
So what does this all mean? Why does the story of a 19th century Apache warrior matter to you listening to this in the 21st century? To me, it proves that certain legacies refuse to be mapped, categorized, or erased. The system that defeated her in the physical world couldn't touch her legacy. She outlasted the guns.
This raises an important question, and it's something the source material ultimately challenges us to reflect on. We are always told that history is written by the victors, right?
Right.
It's written by the institutions that believe the world can be conquered, that every inch of land can be mapped, and that everything is ultimately measurable. But Lozen's story survived the very system that tried to erase her. It stands as a testament to the unmeasurable.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
And we live in a modern era completely overflowing with data. We have digital maps in our pockets. We have relentless algorithm-driven logic. We constantly want an app or a screen to tell us where to go, what the danger is, and what to do next.
Oh, definitely. We've outsourced our intuition to our devices.
Exactly. And in relying so heavily on the external data, how much of our own quiet internal intuition do we ignore simply because it can't be easily proven or displayed on a screen? Lozen's survival depended entirely on tuning out the noise and listening to a whisper no one else could hear.
That is the exact thought I want to leave you with. In a world of endless maps and constant data, how much of your own sight have you traded for the comfort of a screen? Think about that today. Think about a woman standing perfectly still in the shimmering, silent heat of the desert, closing her eyes, listening to the invisible, already knowing exactly what's coming.